Hey everyone, I'm Mari. I am the Action Network Director of Product, and we have Amy with us. Amy, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, all. My name is Amy Chin-Lai. Pronouns are she, her. I'm one of the backend developers at Action Network.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I'm excited to have everyone here. We are going to spend the next 25 minutes, maybe a little bit more, depending on questions, talking about verified opens, which is very exciting. This is a new feature that we deployed on the 28th of last month. So it's just a recent deploy, and we are excited to just show you how it works. And we're gonna do a little bit of explaining of how this intersects with deliverability as well. So let me share my screen here. So as we go through, if you have any questions, you can put those in the chat. There's a handy Q&A section, and we will kind of answer questions as we go through, and we will also have time for them at the end as well. Okay, so without further ado, so we introduced ourselves. I'm going to talk a little bit about what this feature is. Amy, the engineer who built the feature, very excited to have her here, is going to go into the context and background of what this feature really means for your program, how it could be useful, and then we're going to dive into how to actually use verified opens in the system, and then leave time for Q&A at the end. So let's do it. So this new feature, like I said, it was deployed just a couple of weeks ago. The big picture is that you can now target your activists based on whether they have opened your group's email in a verified or unverified way. So you can see this in the tool set when you're sending an email. You can see the new option for opens to be verified, unverified, or all. You can also see this in your stats after you sent an email, in your queries, when you're looking at ladders. There's lots of places that this will show up. So before we dive in, Amy's going to go into some background.
Thanks, Mari. And I think you have to enable the chat. I don't have that ability.
Yep. Thank
Thanks so
you.
much.
Yep.
Great. So we'll start with kind of how opens actually work. So leaving behind all this verified, unverified stuff, when email is sent from Action Network, we embed this tiny 1x1 invisible pixel into your email. So that's inside your email. And then when someone opens the email and it loads up and loads the images, it loads the images, including that 1x1 pixel. When that pixel is loaded, that counts as an open. It sends this notification basically to Action Network saying, hey, Mari opened this email. That's fantastic. And that's how it works. And that's how it's worked since these open pixels started way back when in the email world. But that kind of creates a problem. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the problem with that is images can load or not load for a variety of different reasons. Some email services will consistently block image downloads. Maybe you work at a place that has all images blocked. A lot of .edu addresses do it. Government addresses may do it. You might just have bad network or bad cell service. You might be underground. And there's also various plugins and security plugins that you can have that block those downloads. So things can not be counted as an open when they are actually opened because the images didn't render. And on the other hand, pixels can be pre-loaded and cached. So maybe somebody opened it, but you're not really sure. And so that is what brings us into how opens work now. So how I like to think about opens is with these big balloon waving things you see outside like car washes and car dealerships. 1,000 people drive past that every hour, let's say. Open rates are like assuming that all 1,000 of those people registered and remembered your big giant waving things. People aren't, maybe they see it, maybe they don't, but you don't know for sure. It's just 1,000 people going past. So think of open terms in that sense, that opens have never been perfect. They were not perfect before. 2021. They weren't perfect 5 years ago. They aren't perfect now. So this is not the end all be all truth, but it is still an incredibly helpful metric. So that kind of brings us into why we built this feature. So Apple, with their emphasis on security and privacy, launched Apple Mail Privacy Protection in September in 2021. So what this does is it preloads those images like we were talking about, and that includes that little open pixel. So whenever someone enables Apple Mail Privacy Protection on their phone and is using the native Mail app, so the built-in app with the little blue icon on any Apple device, iPad, Mac, iPhone, and it's enabled, when they receive an email, it will be counted as an open, and that image will be rendered. So the impact of this is probably in September of 2021, you saw your open rates go way, way up. Some people saw like a 20% to a 70%. It was just that great. And it will vary list to list because different audiences have a different number of iPhones. But we saw a really high adoption rate with Apple Mail Privacy Protection, which is why that number went so high. And the impact of this is not all of those 70% or whatever people actually opened your email. Now, we're not sure how many. They were just registered as an open, but there wasn't really a way to tell or know for sure what this verified open rate was. So email users and email senders like SendGrid, which is how Action Network sends you your email, created some tech to see how likely it was that a non-human, meaning the machine, your iPhone, opens the email. So using that technology, we were then able to build that this feature that tells you if an open can be verified as opened by a human. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you so much. So now that we have this technology, there's two different types of opens. And when we did this deploy, like the 28th of November, you saw these new stats appear on your pages. So there's a verified open, which is when we're reasonably sure that a human opens that email. So it's someone who does not have MPP turned on that device. And it's like, yes, definitely, they probably opened that email. And then there's an unverified open. You might hear other people call this a machine open. We don't really like that terminology because that indicates that a machine definitely opens it, when a human could have also opened that email. We just don't know. So that's why we call it unverified. And that just means that this was an email, the device has MPP, but it counted as an open. And so now we have these nice stats, and you'll see here, you have your opens, and that's both your verified and your unverified combined, as well as then your verified and then your unverified. So those are your new stats, and this looks different than what you had before this most recent update. Now, why does this matter? So opens matter for deliverability. We have a lot of great deliverability trainings. If you haven't read our guide yet or been to one of those trainings, I highly recommend it. But engagement is really the key to good deliverability. And by engagement, we mean opens, clicks, taking action, reading the email for a long time. And even negative things like unsubscribes or spam complaints are also signals of engagement, just not always the type that you would like. Now that we have these two different types of opens, it can help you narrow down because you have more data points. So with our verified opens, that is for sure when we know that people are engaged. And that can be super helpful as you're encountering deliverability problems. When you have deliverability issues and your emails are often going to the spam box, we often tell you to shrink your list so that you're only targeted people who are engaged. And that's a best practice to do all the time, is to only email people who are engaged recently on your list. So when we are now creating those queries, if we really need to tighten up our targeting and make sure that we're hitting people that are the most engaged, we can target these verified openers. And we don't have to do that forever. It's just while you're building back up your deliverability reputation. So it's helpful in that sense. And also because with mail privacy protection, if your email goes to spam, that email does not get machine opened. So that means if your machine open rate, your unverified open rate goes way down, then that means probably your email might have gone to spam, or Apple, had a bug. I don't know. That's probably unlikely. So just go ahead and accept that probably you might have gone to spam. So that's a good indicator to watch for as well. If your unverified open rate is like at 50% and then it goes down to 5, that indicates a problem. So all of that to say, and Mari will show more of this in the next part, but this can be really helpful as you are determining future strategies, as you're working on your engagement, because over time, you can use this to try different things out. When you're doing your A/B testing, you know you're going to always have really engaged people with those verified opens when used in combination with things like clicks and actions and donations. And you should still use opens. Opens are not a dead metric just because we have unverified in there too, because a good chunk of those people actually did open your email. So this is not as helpful if you are trying to explain to your boss or a board member who doesn't quite know this area why your open rates were 30% 5 years ago and why they're 60% now. So as you are adjusting to these new metrics, make sure that you adjust your expectations as well, change up your spreadsheets a little bit, because not all your numbers are going to be the same when we're looking at this timeline.
So yeah, so this is a lot of great information. Maybe we can take a pause. There's one question in the chat, Amy, if you want to touch on machine opens in the system that disappeared from Alan. And then if anybody else has any questions about kind of what verified versus unverified really means, we can pause for a second to see if anybody has those questions.
Yes. So we used to report on machine opens, and now that's disappeared from the stats, is what Alan said. And yes, machine opens are the same as those unverified opens. We just changed the name, but it's still the same thing. And Yvonne asked how an open is reflected when it's done on a PC. And the answer is that depends. It is not subject to Apple Mail privacy protection because it's not an Apple device, but someone could be using an email reader that blocks those image downloads. So being on a PC does not prevent you from being an unverified open. There is no hard and fast rule when it comes to PCs, because there's not only the device you're on, but the email reader that you're using, and things of that nature. Plugins, long list.
Cool. Any other questions that we can answer? I shared this in the Q&A, but I can put it in the chat as well. This is our documentation that Amy wrote a long time ago. That kind of goes through MPP and the change there, if folks want some extra context. And we got another question from Charles.
Hey, Charles. Yeah. So the denominator for verified open rate and unverified open rate is the number sent.
Cool.
Yeah. So,
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you can, Mari, if you would like.
Well, I was going to say, maybe we should tackle some general deliverability questions at the end. Getting some good questions here. Okay, so why don't we tackle some of these questions after we dive into what the feature looks like?
Yeah, I think that'll answer some of the questions as well.
Cool. Okay, cool. All right, so we are going to get to all these questions. I'm going to talk a little bit, show a little bit what this looks like in the system, and then we will definitely stay on to make sure that we're getting everything. So in your group, this is one of our engineers. Folks may have talked to him, Jason, this is his group. There's a couple different places where this shows up in your stats. So that's the first place to look. Somebody mentioned this used to be displayed as machine opens, and we switched to verified and unverified. So if you go to your emails tab, you will see your long list of emails, and you can see your stats for individual emails, and you can now see verified and unverified. And we're doing the percentage as well as the raw numbers. And that'll also show up if you take a look at the manage page for an email that you just sent, those numbers will also be here. And again, like Amy said, it's really like we're reasonably sure that a human opened a verified email. We are not sure whether it's unverified if a person or a machine opened, if it's in the unverified category. So pretty self-explanatory, hopefully there. The other place that you can look if you're looking for stats, if I go back to my emails tab, hopefully everybody uses this feature. If you scroll down, you can click to download your email stats. It's date limited, so you could see what are my stats for the last week, for the last month, for the last year. And then you can also choose to group by domain or not, or to kind of just see everything together. And I can show what this looks like here. So this is just 3 emails, but you can see total sent Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, and I can keep, it's very long. Unique opens, verified, and then it'll be unverified as well. And so you can see that for each of your emails, if you'd like to. Okay, so I'm gonna, so this, if you have a smaller list, it can be a little bit confusing about how to get started with verified versus unverified opens. Just using it as another metric in your program, you have your total opens that you've always maybe been looking at, and now you have this additional metric of verified versus unverified. If you're working with a larger list, you can think about using them to actually target. So targeting by verified or unverified opens as well. So if I go into my people's menu down here, I can click to create a new email, which I have right here. This is the targeting page for an email. And we have all of these different categories for filters. And it shows up in a couple different places. The first is in the engagement section. So email engagement is a really interesting filter. It's on the newer side for us. It is activists who have subscribed, opened, clicked, or taken action in a time period. So you can do 90 days, 30 days, 180 days. Now you'll see this new option here, or target by verified openers. So I can do all openers, verified openers, or unverified openers. If I scroll down, it's in a couple different places. It's here, it's on the include and the exclude side, or target by verified openers for just email opens. And then I can scroll down to the email section, and it exists again here, email openers for specific emails, or just all openers, verified or unverified. So any questions on kind of this section here that we can answer about what it looks like to use it, either kind of looking at the stats or within the interface? Happy to answer some of those. If you're thinking about using verified opens, likely you want to kind of use it in query mode. So if you haven't created a query in the people section here, it's just a saved bit of targeting, right? So I can add a new query. You might want to have, in addition to maybe you have a 90-day actives query, now we're going to create a 90-day actives verified only. And I'm going to set that up here. So open activity, at least one email in the last 90 days. And then again, only verified, right? And then I'm going to add another one. Typically, these are action, click, and open. So I'm going to do one in the last 90 days. And then I'm going to add another one, which is click activity. And Amy mentioned deliverability. So this is, our best recommendation. If you're seeing any issues with your spam rate, if you're seeing your open rate go down, your click rate go down, kind of you're worried about your deliverability, the best thing that you can do is only send to your engaged activists and tighten up that window. So maybe you'd previously been sending to, your year actives, and then all of a sudden you see a dip in your deliverability and you're worried. You can start to try and, for a period of time, tighten up your query. So you're only sending to your 90-day actives or your 180-day actives, kind of whatever window you're comfortable with. And this, I think, would be like a step further. So now, if you're still worried, you want to go a step further and really hit your most engaged activists, people that you're sure have engaged with your list and with your content in the last 90 days, you would do verified openers only. So it's kind of the next step above of getting to really high quality activists on your list. So I can save this and I would have a version of this in my queries where I could have just verified folks. And I probably have a version of this with unverified and verified together as well. And we want to caution folks, to not be too, don't go on this too hard right away, right? So like definitely test, before making this a part of your regular program. It can be very useful. It's an interesting way to like help measure the health of your program. But we don't want to see you like tightening up and really limiting who you're sending to unless it's necessary, right? So now I have 90-day engaged or 90-day actives, and I'll be able to target that query in an email. The only other thing we wanted to talk about briefly before I do, any questions about kind of how to use this feature in the interface before we move on? Cool. Okay, so just to review then, thinking about how to integrate this into your program, like everybody can start looking at it as another indicator of good deliverability and is my program doing well. So it's just taking a look at the stats when you're looking at your email after you sent it, like what does my verified open rate look like? Is it going way down? Downloading your email stats. It's also available in your ladder stats as well, so you'll be able to see that. And then if you have a larger list, thinking about creating some of these queries to have another level of targeting to play around with. And again, we always say test. So test it before you make it a big part of your program. Cool. So now we'll go through the questions that we have that are still open and make sure that we answer all of those that are related to deliverability more generally. Then for folks who want to stay on, there are two other features that I'm going to really briefly show that were also deployed as a part of this last deploy, which I think are fun and we can take a look at. So let's do that. So starting, let's see, where did we miss? So from Miriam, how can we shrink our list if we haven't had numerous emails go to spam? Is there another way to address this issue about deliverability? Amy, do you know what this?
Yeah. So when we talk about shrinking your list, there's a few different ways to do that. So the first thing you want to do is you want to see your engaged people and only send your emails to your absolutely most engaged. What depends as most engaged kind of varies on how you run your program. Because if you only send an email once a month, then someone who's engaged in your last 3 emails is probably someone who actually wants to receive your email. And the key to deliverability and ending up in the inbox is to send the emails people want to receive and that they engage with. So if you send emails like 4 times a week, if someone hasn't opened an email, clicked, taken action in the last maybe 14 or 30 days, that would be your window. So you can play around with those stats with reports or with queries. There's a save and count query button that I really like as you're kind of fiddling with the numbers, but you want the shrink your list number to end up as a much smaller percentage of your list. And as your deliverability improves, depending on how often you send, it's going to take a few sends, several sends most of the time, and you can slowly re-engage people who are on those other tiers of engagement.
Cool. Want to keep going down? I think a lot of these are going to be for you.
Yes. I'll just go on in order. So Tara asked, what if people have images turned off? So if images are turned off, well, that image isn't going to load. So that means it might not be counted as open. But every email reader does this a little differently. So Again, not a hard and fast rule, but there's a lot of variables here, and that's why whatever you see your open rate is, it's never your true or perfect open rate. Sophia asked, if running a reactivation campaign, would you recommend using unverified or verified opens to determine who's active? I would not recommend breaking it down into verified and unverified. You should just do any opens. And that's because those people who are unverified, again, doesn't mean that they didn't open the email. It means some of them probably did and some of them didn't. So if you have a larger list, and I'm talking like above 50K, you could play around with doing a randomizer. You could kind of test and see what happens. But I would really discourage people from jumping into only using verified opens for their reactivation campaigns. That could not go well. Lori asked, what are the target open rates now? So on our deliverability dashboard, we have some metrics that kind of show in the green, yellow, and red what your target rates should be. And this is going to vary from list to list to some extent. I mean, you're not, we wouldn't really recommend anyone have open rates that are below 15%, but depending on the makeup of your list, give or take. So your open rate right now, still that top line open is still going to be the same as it was before this deploy. It's just different than it was pre-2021. So whatever you've been using for the past couple of years, that is still what you can make that overall open rate threshold be. And Lori asked, do unsubscribes count as clicks? The answer is sometimes. So if someone uses the unsubscribe link that is in the footer of the emails, that's the one that Action Network automatically puts in there, that someone clicks, they go to the page, that counts as a click because they're clicking in the email. There's also something called a list unsubscribe. So when you are in your email, I know Gmail and Apple both have it, where next to the subject line at the very top, before you get to like the email that you wrote, it has this little like unsubscribe link. And that doesn't take you to any different web page. It just kind of does something in the background. That does not count as a click. Most unsubscribes come through that footer, depending on your list.
So, you know, if more questions come up, put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A. We're happy to answer them. I want to flag, I put this in the chat, our deliverability guide that Amy wrote many years ago is extremely relevant. It has a lot of good information because I know we're sharing a lot and every program is really different. So this has recommendations if your list is smaller, if your list is larger. It talks about reactivation, best practices. There's a lot here. So I definitely recommend taking a look at this deliverability guide and attending. We do periodic deliverability trainings as well. So we dive into deliverability best practices in those. So be on the lookout for those. I'll send this out in the follow-up email. But while we wait and just see if there are any other questions, I wanted to show a couple features not related to deliverability in this last deploy. So for folks who haven't been into the settings tab for a while, so again, I'm on my group manage page. If you peek into the settings tab, it's been reorganized, which is great because there's a lot here. You might not see the settings tab if you don't have the admin permission. There's a specific admin permission for the settings tab. But if you can see it, kind of peruse through, there's a lot of defaults in here that I think can be really helpful. A new default that is a part of this deploy is in the email settings tab. So I can see there's default email targeting. So we used to be able to include one single query as a default. Now you can include and exclude queries. You can do multiple, and you can also do reports as well. So this is great if you're always including or excluding a single tag, if you're always using like a 365 actives query, you know, this is something that's always a part of your email program and you don't want to have to add it every single time. This is a great little shortcut. It'll show up on your targeting page and you can always remove that filter if you'd like to. So it's not, it's editable on an email per email basis. And then in the mobile settings, the same is true for queries when you're sending out mobile messages if you have that enabled. So flagging that exists. The other thing that came out of this deploy, and there's a bunch of things, but the other thing that came out of this deploy is a disclaimer text pop out for all of our actions. So I have a form here. If you're creating a form, if you're creating an event, there's this pop out option that allows you to add a little bit more context to whatever you're sending. You can add legal language if you need to, but it's just another place to put language that's not directly in the description. So I can show you what it looks like here. This is a really simple form. Sign up to volunteer. We need your help. And you can see this very kind of smaller text at the bottom. This is the disclaimer text, and it exists. If I'm on the edit page, you can see it right here. I can close it. You can add it back. It's optional for every action. So this is also new, another place for you to put language. Hope it's useful. And now we are done. So that's all the content that we had. Make sure you and your team, I'm going to put these in a chat, that everybody is signed up for updates so that you get our deploy emails. And that you are checking out our release notes as they are up. This is like a comprehensive list of everything that we've deployed or released in the toolset history. We can send out a recording, Yvonne, definitely, if that would be helpful. And then we have our handy blogs and trainings page as well for folks to check out. So we'll send a follow-up email. We can include the recording. We can include a bunch of these resources that we've been sharing. And we'll hang out and we'll answer some more questions as those come up. Otherwise, thanks everyone for joining. Really hope this was helpful and hope that verified opens can be useful in your program in some way moving forward. Yeah, of course. Thanks, Sherry.
And I can answer the question in the
Sure.
chat. So this is asking about the previous bounces and previous spam complaints metrics that are also on your stat page. We've had this for a few years now, and this is for folks that have bounced and okay. Is there a way we can put that question back up? Because now I'm forgetting what that question was. Can we do that? Okay.
It's in the answered.
Oh, really? Oh, good job, Zoom. Good job. Okay, there we go. So on Action Network, we have what we call a global block list. So when someone, when you send someone an email from Action Network and that email address bounces or that person hits spam, then they are placed on the global block list. So that means when someone sends them an email, they're not going to be able to. Because every subscription status across groups is separate, like there's no master list, right? I could be subscribed to the Action Network list, but I wouldn't be subscribed to Mari's Save the Whales group, and that's all separate, right? But if Mari had sent me an email from the Save the Whales group and I bounced, then that means my email is no longer good. So that means no email across the rest of Action Network would go through. So the previous bounces and previous spam complaints metric you see is from people who you tried to email but have just bounced or submitted a spam complaint on another list on Action Network. And that's to protect the deliverability across the entire platform, since we know it's not a good email address.
Cool. Thanks for everyone who's having to jump. If there are other questions, we're happy to hang out for a little bit and answer them. But otherwise, hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday. I love a good Friday. Cool. Is there a way to put notes about activists in a report? So you could, the short answer is not really, in a way that's not going to be super messy. But you could, if you wanted to, have like a notes custom field that lived on somebody's record. It was downloadable in reports. It would be like a notes custom field, but that can obviously get really, really messy. So that's possible. Bruce? And then do you see in this question from Alex, to reframe my point about clicks from unverified openers, the most helpful thing for me for my list was to realize that I could not discount unverified machine opens because they read and click at the same rate as verified.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's how it's probably going to be across the board. So appreciate your insight there.
Yep. And then Kathy is asking about the save the whales. If somebody marked an email spam and saved the whales, yes, they would be on our spam list. They can get off of our block list if they fill out a form saying that they will not mark email as spam again. But research shows that if somebody marks an email as spam once, they're very likely to do it again. And it's very bad for your program. It's very bad for everybody's program. So there is a small percentage of people who, if they've marked an email as spam, they will go on the block list. If they reach out to you and they're like, I'm not getting your email anymore and I really want to, they can fill out a form, like I said. You can reach out to the activist. The form is right here in the document and they can get removed from the block list. And then Lori asks, if a bouncing email is corrected, will they still be blocked?
Once you change that, so if you need to change their email on the activist record, so let's say, it does whatever, then you would still need to click resubscribe in order to resubscribe them. But for us, a bounce is not, that might be too in the weeds. We only count like hard bounces, not soft bounces. Okay. Are there cases, Rebecca asked, are there oh my God, words. Are there cases where email providers mark email addresses as bouncing or spam complaining before they even reach the activist? Is whitelisting the only way to avoid this? So bouncing is not something that like the recipient does. That's something that the server would do. So when you send an email and it's at like mari@gmail.com, if Mari bounces because she deleted her account, that's not something Mari herself does. That's something Gmail does. So it means like it never even got to Mari in the first place. A bounce is like it's not getting to the inbox, it's not gonna go. And whitelisting is different. So whitelisting is generally helpful if you are running your own email server, or your own, sometimes like Google Workspace. And so that would be to allow certain email addresses through that get blocked. And that's like IP address based too. If you have questions about that, ask support because it gets a little messy. And spam complaining is something that only the recipient can do because they're hitting that report spam button. Spam complaint is only hitting that report spam button. It's not ending up in the spam folder. That's not a metric.
Mm. And Miriam asks, can we still send mass emails to our entire list or should we start sending these in segments? And Amy can jump in too. I think generally our advice is to never do a full list send because the best way to protect your deliverability is to send email to people that are engaging with it. And it's very unlikely that your whole list is engaged with your emails. So I think this matters more and more the larger your list is. So if you have a smaller list, you're more likely to be able to fall under the radar a little bit, fly under the radar. But generally, if you have a smaller list, check out the deliverability guide. There are some recommendations for smaller lists. Something like even having like a year-long actives query would be good. So it's like it's not like you're cutting a ton of people off, but you still have some sort of a cutoff. So you're not kind of spamming people who are never engaging with your email. Would be a good thing to think about. Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if we want to put numbers on that. Is it Tara or Tara? What do we consider a small list or a large list? Amy, do you want to?
I mean, it kind of depends on which context we're talking about, because when we're also talking about some of these deliverability strategies, it's also small or large capacity. Because if you are a one-person show running a 1 million person email list, you don't have time to do all of these things if you're if you're doing everything for that organization. So take what fits your needs. And anyone can do those like low to medium capacity things, and it won't take too long. A list of 700 would not be considered large, though. We'd at least be talking in the tens of thousands.
But there are some great strategies here in the deliverability guide, like having a welcome series is really great. Thinking about engagement targeting and how to do that. It says like 60 to 100-day actives. So there's definitely some things too that we can share there. And unfortunately, Bruce, we can't share how big our biggest list is, but I get the curiosity. Cool. Thanks for hanging out, everyone. Seems like things are slowing down a little bit. Hopefully this is helpful. Again, really appreciate all the questions and the back and forth. We will do our next webinar. Yvonne asks, so we have trainings on a regular basis. So I shared in the chat and I'll send it out. So we do trainings. You can see in our community, in our support section, our training calendar. So we do trainings every week. Amy and I do trainings, more on an ad hoc basis. But we're planning to do more deliverability deep dives if this is helpful. Product deep dives where we really dig into a specific feature. Cool. So nothing is planned. All right, so we are going to hop off. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for the questions and the engagement. We'll send a follow-up email and enjoy your weekends.
Thanks, y'all.